Christmas time, and it means that we are doing storytelling. So tonight's bedtime story is The Ugly Duckling, one of my favorite stories. It was summer and the countryside was beautiful. In the grass near a pond, Mother Duck was sitting on her nest. She had been sitting on her eggs for a very long time, and she knew that soon her ducklings would be hatched. At last, one egg after another began to crack. The little ducklings poked their heads out. Cheep, cheep, they said, but the largest egg had not opened. Finally, the big egg cracked. What a disappointment! How big and ugly the last duckling was! He was not soft and yellow like the other ducklings. Mother Duck thought perhaps the egg from which the ugly duckling had been hatched was not hers, but she loved him just the same and took him down to the pond with the other ducklings. He tried very hard and was a good swimmer, even though he looked different. She hoped that someday he would grow to look like his brothers and sisters. Time passed and he grew bigger, but still did not have yellow feathers. The other animals made fun of him, and he was miserable. Even the turkey gobbled at him. Finally, Mother Duck decided to send him away to join the wild ducks. She thought he would be happier with them. He understood and agreed to go. The ugly duckling started out through the forest. It was dark and cold. He was afraid and lonely. A large rabbit hopped past on his way home. Strange animals frightened him. The trees and flowers looked different and made rustling noises at night. At last he reached the marsh, where even the wild ducks were not friendly. The ugly duckling hid in the tall grass and looked around. Hunters with guns and barking dogs walked through the water. He was more afraid than ever. He stayed very still until the hunters left. Then he hurried away from the marsh and ran across the fields and meadows, still very unhappy and afraid. Soon he came to a poor little cottage on the edge of the forest. An old woman lived there with her cat and hen. In the evenings, they would sit before the fire and let the ugly duckling stay with them. But when they found out that the ugly duckling would not lay any eggs or do any work, they sent him away. Once more, he set out alone. The winter grew cold. There was snow on the ground and the lake was frozen. The ugly duckling almost died from cold and starvation. One day, a peasant saw him shivering at the edge of the lake, picked him up gently and took him home. The peasant thought his children would warm the poor duckling and feed him. The children were happy when their father came home. They wanted to feed the little duckling and play with him, but he was afraid they would hurt him. He thought they would make fun of him because he was so ugly and clumsy. He tried to hide from them. He was always frightened, always fearful. One day he was running away from them to find a safe corner, and he made a terrible mess. He knocked over a pail of milk, and the milk went over all of the freshly washed clothes and floor. And in his hurry to get out of the way, he landed in a pile of flour the cook had measured for bread. She screamed and chased him out of the house. Finally, spring came. The air became warm and the grass grew green and there were flowers in the meadow. The ugly duckling came to a lake. He looked around and saw a beautiful white bird with long necks gliding across the water. The ugly duckling followed them, feeling ashamed of his ugliness, and he hung his head. But when he looked into the clear blue water, he was surprised. He was no longer an ugly duckling. He had changed over the long winter months. He had become a swan, as beautiful and graceful like the other swans on the lake. At last, he was happy. He swam away with the other swans and was never lonely again. So children, this is a beautiful story. The moral of this story is not to judge others, and also, very importantly, believe in the beauty that lies within. Have a good night and sweet dreams.